Hi everyone, are you ready to work on a comic together? I'm Kibikana and welcome back to my channel, and today we're going to be drawing a one-page comic. Now, believe it or not, because I very rarely post comics on my channel, I don't think I actually have shared any of them that I've done, but I technically have a degree in sequential art, so theoretically I should know how to do this. It's been a while since I've had the opportunity to work on a one-page, and I thought I would share my process with all of you so that you would kind of get a sense of what to do and what not to do if you're working on your own comic, so let's get into it. Now, the first thing I'm going to suggest for making comics is to treat it like an illustration. And I don't mean that it has to look painterly like what I do in my style. Instead, I mean that you should be focusing on what the page looks like as a whole, as if it was one complete illustration. I'm sure you've heard this before if you've made comics, but flow is really important. Instead of focusing in on one particular panel, you focus on that image as a whole. Because here's the thing, people aren't going to just be looking at one panel at a time, they're going to be taking in the whole page. You want to make sure that it all works together. Now, I'm just going to be talking about one-pages today. It is going to be a little different if you're doing a multi-page comic, so if you'd like a tutorial on that or are just really interested in seeing more of my comic work, let me know and I'd be happy to share a more detailed tutorial from start to finish about multi-page comics. Leave that in the comments if that's something you're interested in, and I'll definitely make a video about that at some point. Okay, back to advice. So the first thing I'm going to recommend is having a really strong thumbnail, and I'm not really focusing so much on the actual details, and I'm more so trying to figure out how I want to guide the reader's eye through the page, because that's going to help everything look a lot more cohesive. So you can see I started by placing a focal point of this ship at the top left corner because that's where everyone is going to start reading. You know, we read from left to right. And then I have the word balloon on the right-hand side a little lower so that the viewer's eyes are carried from that ship down to the word balloon. And then from the word balloon, that leads back into my characters' faces. So ultimately, you're kind of creating this S shape, and this shape is going to be really, really important for comics and flow. You'll see it's a shape that a lot of artists use, kind of weaving back and forth when they're making comics. I'm going to put some examples up on the screen so you can get an idea of what I mean. Let's take this page, for example. You're going to start with the text over here, and then you're going to read from left to right, but you hit this compositional element of this black silhouette, which instead leads the reader to travel down this way, hitting this word balloon right here, and then that's going to be carried through the character and then back hitting this word balloon down here. So again, you've got this sort of zigzag S curvy shape. It's not going to be an S every time, but look for those curves. That's really what you want to create the flow. Okay, let's look at another example. And this is a similar situation where you have your text over here, the eye is going to follow to this word balloon right here, and then you're going to kind of follow the characters down to this final section of text. And because you have these silhouette shapes right here, everything gets framed really nicely. Again, you have that curve shape. This is also going to be the same for things like manga. It's a little different because you're reading from right to left instead of from left to right, but again, follows a very similar principle. You have your word balloons, they're going to carry you across the page this way, then you snake back around here, and then you have this beautiful shape. This is like a masterclass in flow that just carries you right into this focal point right down there. Again, you've got this sort of S-shape, curve shape. I love this page. Anyway, there are a lot of other things to think about when you're in this thumbnailing stage, like the kind of movement you want, the kind of shots you're including, you know, establishing shots, long shots, medium shots, close-ups, all of those things. You also have gutters and sort of the actual panel layout, how many panels are going to be on each page. Fun fact, usually it's not more than 6. That can change, but just as a general rule. Anyway, there's a lot of stuff to think about. Too much to go into this video right now. Again, if you want a longer, more detailed video, I'd be happy to share one at some point. But for the sake of this video, we're just going to focus on flow. I really believe that that's where everything starts. So now that we've got a sense of that, let's talk about other things I do to sort of unify the entire comic page. I really like to put a gradient over the whole page, cover all of the panels, and then use that as sort of a jumping off point for my color. It's kind of like unifying a palette. If you're working traditionally and you mix, let's say, a little bit of blue into all of your other colors to kind of give them all that blue tint. That's sort of what I'm doing with a gradient. I did that with my cat comic that I did a while ago, and it just helps me to, again, focus on the image as a whole rather than getting so bogged down in each panel and then maybe the colors don't really work together. Sometimes it might be different if you want a panel to be really contrasting. Say you want a bright pink background to really draw the eye there. That's obviously an option, but as a general rule, putting these gradients really helps me unify everything so it doesn't look really disjointed and unpleasant and like it doesn't go together. So that's something I'd recommend trying if you struggle to color your comics. After my gradient map is down, I just start jumping between panels and coloring sort of at a similar rate for the whole page. Again, I think this really helps me because I often get stuck on individual panels and get really frustrated with trying to get all of the details right, and then the rest of the page sort of suffers, or I sort of run out of stamina and can't finish a page. So if that's happening to you, really look at it, again, I'm going to say this over and over again, like that whole illustration, and try to render everything out or color it at a similar rate rather than doing everything for one panel. Another big thing with making comics is obviously speed. You can't spend as much time as you would on a normal illustration on these comic pages. Plus, the truth is that people are probably going to be looking at each panel for like maybe 20 seconds max. Like usually it's like 5 seconds, 10 seconds, something like that. So you can't get too bogged down in the details. So I'll actually intentionally leave a lot of mess if I see a line that's kind of blurring into another line or things aren't looking super clean or tidy. I try not to fix it too much because that's what really, really, really bleeds into a lot of my time. Instead, I try to leave things a lot looser. Sometimes I'm successful with that, sometimes I'm not, but it does make the process go a lot faster. Also with rendering, I try to limit myself to just a dark value, a medium value, and a light value. And you can kind of see on this jacket when it gets fully rendered, I do blend those together a lot, but I'm really focusing on those super dark shapes, the medium shapes, which are sort of the actual color of or value of whatever I'm drawing, and then those highlight shapes. And I try not to do more than that or add in a bunch of reflective light or anything like that. Like, it is very pretty, but it just takes too much time for a comic page. I might do that sort of thing for a double page spread or a panel that I really want people to look at for a long time, but again, the deal with comics is speed, speed, speed. So I have to be realistic with myself and remember that not every page can be an illustrative masterpiece. Another thing I do to save time is to just get really, really loose with my perspective. You can see up here in this top panel, I've sort of drawn in a super, super loose perspective guide, and I haven't used any rulers for that, and I'm not going to. I'm just sort of eyeballing where things should go, and then I'm gonna do my best at figuring it out, because perspective takes a lot of time, and especially if you're drawing a scene that's sort of more organic, like these rock shapes I have, you do need to have a perspective guide, but it's gonna offer you a little more creative freedom than if you're drawing like a building, let's say. If you're super new to perspective, I maybe don't recommend doing this because it might be even more of a challenge than just slapping that grid down there and actually using rulers, but it will save you a lot of time if you sort of can figure out what you're doing. And I also promise that you can get away with a lot more weirdness in your perspective than you might think you can, so give it a try if it's something that you feel a little comfortable with. Okay, last up we're going to talk about character design cohesion, which is another important part of making your comic look like it belongs together. These are two of my OCs, Scion and Delphi, that I actually designed for a character design class that I taught a couple years ago. And I thought it was about time I revisited them, but I designed them really specifically so I knew that they would look good together in a comic setting. Since these are the two main characters of this particular story, I know that they're going to be seen a lot next to each other, and I also know that they're on the same team working for the same company. So it's really important to clue your audience into that when you're designing characters for comics. For example, I use a lot of the same colors in their designs to sort of tie them together. Now they have their own unique designs, their own unique color schemes, but I'm using a lot of the same browns and blacks, a little bit of red in both of their designs, just to sort of tie them together in that way. It's something you can see a lot of other artists do in comics, like take Saga for example. A lot of the colors that are used in different characters are still really similar, like you'll see the different browns crop up in different places or different greens, and that just sort of, again, unifies those characters. Now I'm just adding in my finishing details. I had a lot of fun working on this one. I know this is a more conversational video, but I think these are fun too, and I hope that some of this advice was helpful. If you enjoyed watching, please consider liking, commenting, or subscribing. It really helps me out, and as always, please feel free to leave any video ideas in the comments below. I love reading your suggestions, and I want these videos to be as helpful as possible, so if you're looking for a particular tutorial, just let me know. As always, thank you so much for watching, and I hope I'll see you next week. I have new videos every Monday at 3 p.m. EST, but until then, let's all keep drawing!